What's up, Michigan? Welcome to the final Hang Time episode of the season, but this more formally is State Champs at the State Finals. This is the boys basketball state championship recap presented by Lawrence Technological University. The Hang Time crew is here with you. I'm Lorne Plant, Scott Burnstein, and TJ Kelley. And hey, if you're feeling nostalgic, you can find an entire season of Hang Time shows, all 12 episodes available on the State Champs Network YouTube page. And if you enjoy podcasts, visit Spreaker.com. Listen, you can check out all season long the interviews we had with boys basketball coaches from all over the state, presented by the Basketball Coaches Association of Michigan. And speaking of BCAM, we thank them again for their partnership, and I can't wait to share with you what we've got planned for next year. A lot of logistics have to happen to make it work, but it's next level, and State Champs will be more invested in boys and girls basketball, just as we should. All right, so we are here to show and talk about the state finals that just recently took place at the Breslin Center in East Lansing. Some brief comments, and stay tuned to the end of the show for our state finals headlines. And these are what we remember the most about what took place at the state finals this year. All right, we're going to start in Division 4. First state championship for Munising.
Wasn't that kind of a theme a little bit?
It was.
We were crowning a lot of new champions.
We were.
And it wasn't your just run-of-the-mill state finals with all these blue bloods that had all these, banners. That's what I thought was really cool.
I agree. This one went down to the wire, too. And credit Tri-Unity Christian for battling to the end. Ultimately, though, 4 of 19 from three-point land is the key number that jumped out to me in the loss. But I think you can attribute great team defense as to why Munising are state champs.
Hey, hats off to Munising. Did a fantastic job. Coach Keeler talked about, Tri-Unity Christian talked about the game afterwards. And he had hats off to Munising. They did a great job. There were times that Tri-Unity didn't execute, I guess, as well as you might have thought that they would have, or at least what he would have liked to. But yeah, Munising came down. They took care of business. They've got some young guys on that team, sophomores, as the point guard and then the coach's son. And so we'll look for them to be back hopefully next year.
I always think, and I have no idea how the stats bear this out, but I always feel like a team that's coming from as far as Munising's coming, whether it's coming to Ford Field for the football state finals or going to East Lansing for the basketball state finals, I always feel like they're almost at an inherent disadvantage because of the length of the trip. Right. The guys from Tri-Unity are just coming from the west side of the state. It's not that much of a drive, but those Munising guys, that's like a 10-hour trip. So I always think to myself that, you're going to have to be ultra focused and adapt really quickly. So I think it's a tip of the hat to the Munising coaching staff, because there didn't look like, I know the term jet lag is the wrong term, but there didn't seem to be, there was no loss of a first step with these guys. These guys had pep in their step from the first time they stepped foot on the Breslin floor in the semifinals, and played almost mistake-free basketball, and played with high motor, high intensity, and it didn't seem like that trip had any effect on them. So that was something that I took away from it, and just to see them be able to raise their first state championship banner and see a father and a son do it together, it was just a great feel-good story for Munising.
And to be in that environment, of course, being at the Breslin Center, which is so different than what any of these kids, especially these kids, in terms of playing on a really grand stage, you've got to give your hats off to them. Again, Cardinal Mooney came in, a team that was really hot into the semifinals. They play a very similar style. They were able to withstand that. And then I think by the time they got in the finals, they felt really comfortable and confident. Yeah. And it was a great game that went all the way. So congratulations to Munising. We're going to head to Division 3, and again, we talked about maybe newbies. No newbies in this one.
Well, and a shout out to TJ, I think, for the Robert Lee shout out last episode, because Robert Lee was the reason, all due respect to everyone else on that team, but Robert Lee won that state championship for them and immediately started to get college offers that we were talking that didn't exist then.
Yes.
And Wayne State was one of the big ones. I mean, Carmelo Harris was with Beecher, also won state. I mean, I don't know anybody who hasn't won. I mean, if you played with Beecher, it seems over the last 12 years, you've won a championship.
Yes.
But hats off to Wayne State for going ahead and pulling the trigger and making sure that there'd be an opportunity for Robert Lee if he would like to choose to play downtown Detroit. But hats off, and I just like the development of his game, and I think that's one of the things that we've talked about with some of the other winners as well. And Marquise was great.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about Flint Beecher. Let's make it official. 10th state title in their history. They actually won 3 titles in 76, 85, and 87 in Class B. 7th title in 11 years, though, now that they've been able to just dominate the Class C division. They epitomize the saying, they do not rebuild, they reload.
Right. We don't die, we multiply.
And really, if you're going to put it into historical context, they are the last vestige of the Flintstone legacy.
Yes.
Those traditional Flint superpowers of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s have kind of gone by the wayside, where my team played, or Mo Pete, Charlie Bell. So now Beecher is kind of left with, that legacy is on their shoulders, and they do such an amazing job of showing everybody what it means to be a basketball player from Flint.
Right.
Because those guys, from every team that I've watched for the Bucks since I started covering at a professional level in the late 2000s, every team I've seen from Beecher just plays that prototypical Flintstone, relentless, just tough as nails competitors, playing big when the game gets down to the wire in the clutch, and I think it's something that transcends from the coaching staff to the players, because I've never seen a bench that's more, a tightly wound, not in the negative sense, but just that everything's in order, whether it's Marquise Gray or the coaches that came before him. And there were a lot of really great coaches that came before him, but they seem to always be so buttoned up and put their players in the best position to make big plays.
And another thing is the Buccaneers also joined elite company with double-digit championships. You talk about with East Catholic, and you talk about with River Rouge. And so when you're one of 3, and basketball Michigan's been around for 100 years. Hats off to Beecher. In winning, there's more accomplishments that come along, and now that community gets to live in infamy with some other greats that we've had here in Michigan.
And hats off to Traverse City St. Francis.
Yes, without a doubt.
It was a heck of a run.
Is another kid that should be getting his own.
Right, a heck of a run for that program. They were really dominant in football, didn't get the state championship. I know they were bitter about that. I'm sure there were a lot of football guys on that team.
Yeah, Wyatt was the quarterback of the football team, point guard of the basketball team.
Exactly. And so they battled and they hung in there. And again, I think relentless is a good word. Beecher just overcame them.
They play every game I've ever watched of Beecher, they play at a pace that you would think would be a pace that would cause a lot of turnovers and that it'd be really helter-skelter. But their pacing is so fast, the motor is 150%, but they still play under control. And again, that's a tribute to the coaching staff.
Absolutely. Well, in Division II, it took 57 years for Ferndale to cross the finish line in any sport and win a state championship. At the beginning of the season, I don't think anybody could have called the Eagles as the team that would have been the last one standing.
Hats off to Juan Rickman, the rest of all the Eagles, the entire team, because that's what they won with as a team. I was able to talk with Coach Rickman after the game. I believe I asked him a question, having pertaining to do something with, you lose a lot of. You've coached Dave DeJulius, who's at Cincinnati. You've coached Trey Williams, Trey Lewis, who's at Loyola. You've coached Jason Drake, and those were who's at Cleveland State, and those were the teams that were supposed to wind up taking it to the next level, whether it be East English Village, Greg Elliott being another one. But yeah, there've been a lot of guys that he's had, and now he's got a team. And there really are no superstars, but he's got guys that really developed. I know we talked about Chris Williams, we talked about Noah Blocker earlier in the season, about how they've developed in the last few weeks, about how they've developed. And And it's one of those things where you see other guys getting better, you see your teammates getting better, and you want to get hungry too. And as they push each other, and I think that that's one of the things where really ultimately put them over the hump where they were able to get their first championship. And hats off to Juan Rickman for doing a fantastic job and really bringing it together for the Eagles.
This was Juan's best coaching job, and he's one of the true greats that we have in the MHSAA right now. So to say this is his best is actually a tribute to how good he is, because he's got a lot of great seasons under his belt. But if you look at the stat sheet for this team, and the definition of balance and selflessness, every single one of these guys was at like 10, 11, 12 points a game, and I think they had 4 guys that were in double-digit averages for the season. You had, like TJ said, the foundation was laid with those East English Village teams, with the first handful of Ferndale teams he had, and the seniors on this team, led by Cam Reed and Chris Williams and Caleb Renfro, who we'll talk about in a second, they all played as freshmen. I believe 2 of them started as freshmen, and they've been through the wars. And when the Trayvon Lewises and the Jason Drakes depart, or the Colin Golstons before him, you had these marquee Division I superstars that were gunning for the state championship and got close, but they didn't finish the job. It was this group of, I don't want to say throwaways, that's the wrong way to say it, but lesser heralded guys, and we all fought.
Still guys who'd been through the war.
Right, yeah. But I thought, I think a lot of people thought, that this was a year for Ferndale to take a step back and reload for 24 and 25. But they didn't get that.
Kind of like maybe what we're seeing with Clarkston.
Yeah,
right?
They didn't get that memo, though, and they just rolled to a state championship and brought it back to Ferndale for the first time since 1966, the Roy Burkhart era, Rick Bloodworth, who went on to play at Michigan. Nobody remembers those guys unless you're from Ferndale.
Right.
And but Ferndale's had a lot of great basketball come through the halls without winning state championships. Tom Staten, Rashad Phillips, Dwayne Stevens, Jarrett Stevens, Rashad Phillips. So just a great job by Juan and this whole team.
And South Christian was rolling.
And last thing I'll say is, for a team that kind of ran roughshod through the tournament until the semifinals, in both the semifinals and the finals, they had to rally.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, no. And another thing with Ferndale is, I want to say, so many kids, they want to rush to get playing time. I'm not so sure if all those guys were thrown into the fire, that they would have had the success or at least win a championship. When you get to watch, I think that there's a lot that you can learn. And I'm just saying, sitting on the bench, you might not be getting all the playing time you want.
Still
but
practicing
you can,
against those guys.
But you can learn how to win.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You evaluate things at a little bit different, at a different pace.
Bench last year.
Yep, and
Trenton Ruth came off the bench last year.
And I mention that all the time, but like even kids in college, I'm like, sometimes when they come in with a lot of prestige and they're not necessarily living, and all of a sudden living up to what they're everybody's saying about them. But then all of a sudden, let's say they have an injury or they have to sit down for a couple of months and a few months, and they get to sit next to an assistant coach and they say, now you see, this is why we're doing this is why we're doing that. You're doing all crazy stuff, And when you get to sit down, breathe in, really take in what's going on, learn how to be a coach on the floor, and I think that was also one of the big, and I want to say this, Cam Reed, who has been roller coaster over his career, he was consistent throughout the game. He wasn't throwing up crazy layups. He wasn't turning the ball over. Really went out there and played really strong defense against some of the best guards, that are out in there in the state, and they're champions in their own right with South Christian.
A 4-year starting point guard in a tournament run. I mean, you want to talk about an equalizer.
Yeah.
Guy's been running your offense for 4 straight years, and then this will be the really last thing I say. From a recruiting perspective, and I talk about this on my blog for State Champs at statechampsnetwork.com.
Right.
For the most part, there's a couple exceptions, but for the most part, recruiting-wise, that Ferndale roster is open for the taking. And I hope that there were a lot of scouts and recruiters out watching this tournament run, because other than Chris Williams, who's going to Cleary, and Jaden Hardiman, who's, I think now he was at Mid-Michigan, and now he's at Alabama. It's one of the smaller Alabama schools.
All right.
But other than those guys, Caleb Renfro, Cam Reed, Trenton Roof's not committed, Noah Block, all those guys are available if you're looking to stack your college roster with playmakers.
Well, and winners.
Right, and
most importantly. But hats off to that whole group right there, because there's nothing better at the end of the day when they say, and I don't even think this group overachieved, but they went in, let's say you're proving the naysayers wrong or whatever. I mean, I didn't have them in my top 20 rankings, probably, until the end of February.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because their record really wasn't.
They started off 1-5.
Yeah, their record wasn't there. And then, but Coach Rickman put together a schedule that really was able to build a championship team. So hats off to him.
And Cam Reed, he led a team to 3 Final Fours, and 1 regional final, I think. So I don't know.
Not too shabby.
Many point guards in any league or conference that can say they've gone to 3 straight Final Fours and won a state championship.
I mean, big advice, great advice, I believe, is stack your schedule, because it doesn't matter what your record is once you get to the playoffs. You'll be ready. Cardinal Mooney was another team that was practically 500 when they got into the tournament, got all the way to the state semifinals. Obviously, what Ferndale did, what Orchard Lake St. Mary's was able to do. A lot of these teams, it just doesn't matter.
The only thing that Ferndale didn't do was win the OAA Red, which they had been the 2-time defending champs. But I'm sure if you said to them, hey man, we're going to win the district, we're going to the regional, we're going to win the state championship.
A red banner.
Right.
Well, the city of Detroit is back on top of Division I for the first time since Detroit Western won in 2015. A lot of you don't remember that. It took me a while to remember that. But Steve Hall has lifted his alma mater to their first basketball state championship in school history.
I tell you what, I just, for a school that has so much tradition, I mean, Lily Tomlin went to the school, but I'm saying, but at the same time, you've got a lot of tradition, whether it be just the alumni that have come through. And now in the last few years, we've seen sports, obviously with the football team, but now to see the basketball team. You talk about a school that's been around for over 100 years, finally get over the hump. They call themselves the jewel of the city. When people say Cass Tech, pretty much, I mean, you don't have to put Detroit Cass Tech. It pretty much speaks for itself.
And by the way, Lily Tomlin's in that 80 for Brady, if you want to know who that is.
Yes, all right. That's nice timing right there.
There was a lot. I mean, go do a Google search and
look
at the famous alumni from Cass Tech.
Right.
I mean,
they do have
a lot of famous people.
Yeah, half of Motown.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to look at it from that aspect.
And when you think of the city, there's no question Cass Tech is the school
that
represents Detroit now.
And it's no slight. I know that they have their rivals, but I mean, at the same time, like Cass Tech is it's been there. I mean, obviously for over 100 years, shortened football field and everything. But yes. But yes, going back to with the victory that Cass Tech put together, I want to say very similar to what Ferndale had. And obviously they had Darius Acuff, who is just received an offer from Michigan on Wednesday, and so he's really putting himself out in the forefront. He's not going to put a lot of information out there. Like, yes, he's had offers from MAC schools, Western, Eastern, and so on and so on. He's just not one of those guys where he's going to put a whole bunch of information out there for everybody to know. Let the chips fall where they may. I'll let my game speak for itself.
Still a sophomore.
Yep, still a sophomore. But there was a strong core right there that Coach Hall had as far as seniors, a blend of football players, a blend of basketball players. And they all wound up meshing together. And the other thing is, when you only have one day and I was talking with some guys after this, and somebody made a point. When you only have one day to scout and prepare for Detroit Cass Tech, because you don't see a lot of teams where their point guard and their center are 6'3", 6'4", and everybody else is, right in that 5'11" to 6'1" range. It just makes it that much more difficult. You can't go out there and trap them because they have so many guards that are out there. They're super fast. They're hard to emulate, in a practice. And I thought the Muskegon would be able to, let's say this. I think Muskegon probably played them as well as they could have, but it just takes a lot to figure out. Maybe Muskegon could have used their bigs a little bit more, but I'm not the coach. I'm not either one way or another. They have the guards that they can do it. With Day, who's going to Aquinas, you got Sidnor, who's going up to Ferris State, and then you've got Jordan Briggs, who's going to Wayne State. And so you would think that core right there, as far as guards, that they might have been able to get it done. But, at the end of the day, hats off to Cass Tech. Great job of Steve Hall sticking with his guns, seeing what he's going to do, and then with the game plan, and this is what we're going to do, and it wound up materializing into a victory. So hats off to them.
I think this is a team and a run that you're going to be talking about for decades. I think that you have the storybook championship with Steve Hall coming back to his alma mater with just laser focused and taking this program to the next level, and he's done just that. But you have a mix of young, old football, basketball, and it was just the perfect brew. And it was Steve, churning it and getting all the proper spices and whatnot, and then serving the meal that led to the state championship. But you got two of what I think eventually will be two of the PSL's all-time great athletes. Cheeks Acuff is already cemented himself as a state champion and as a GOAT.
Yeah.
And then you got CJ Sadler,
Yes.
the football phenom,
Yes.
who exploded this year on the gridiron, and then kind of told people, like, in case you didn't know, I'm a pretty good basketball player too, and played a big role in this run. Sean Hodges, another football player that's going to Grand Valley State, just a lockdown defender, someone that made big shots, did what was asked of him. Kenny Robertson is another guy that I loved as another football, basketball guy, great shooter, great leader. And then to me, the X factor was Trayvon Cooper in the Final Four. I didn't know a ton about him, but he showed me a lot with what he coming to play really big. When the lights were the brightest. I think he had 20 points in the finals. So great job by Steve Hall. And this is an historic team that people will be talking about for years and years. And just again, tip of the hat to Steve with what he did with this group.
And really the last few minutes, because Sadler's fouled out.
Yeah.
And that was a concern.
And there was 2 points? I think Cass was up by 2 points.
Yeah.
Sadler goes out end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, and then they wound up pretty much going on like a 7-0 run or something like that, and really extending it. And I remember, sitting on the sidelines, everyone's like, "Oh, I say, what's going on right here? This isn't supposed to happen." But yeah, again, hats off. You bring up Trayvon Cooper, and Cass has. Muskegon has size. They've got T.J. Davis. They've got a big 6'7" sophomore. They've got Stanley Cunningham, who are all bigger than anybody that Cass has. And when you're the tallest guy on the team and say, "Hey, we need you to do this. We need you to step up." And I think that's one of the important things where that'll carry on in life. When you step up to the big stage, when the pressure is on you, and you go out there and succeed and you perform. So hats off to them.
I think if you trace back to the last week of the regular season, and you had Brother Rice and Cass Tech in the Operation Friendship game, which was an all-time classic Operation Friendship game down at Callahan, and Cass lost in the final seconds.
Yeah.
Brother Rice hit a.
Maybe that's what they needed.
I was gonna say, I think you look back on that and you're almost happy you lost that game.
Maybe that's true.
So
yeah, great point. And State Champs was all over the state championship. So if you want to relive and check out a lot of clips and things that happened at the Breslin Center, just make sure you follow State Champs Michigan and find it on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram, and TikTok, and YouTube, and all that stuff. You can see a lot of some of the things that happened at the state finals. We had access through our partnership with Valley Sports Detroit of some really good locker room stuff. So check it out, and it's there forever for you to visit whenever you like. All right, well, as we close out this edition of State Champs at the state finals, just want to throw it out to these guys, and I'll give mine too. TJ, what will you remember the most about the 2023 boys basketball state finals?
I'm going to remember, because I like messing with Cass Tech people, because they're,
thin skin.
Yeah, and so I've got plenty of friends that are on Facebook, on Twitter and stuff like that. But to really see Cass Tech, I think that Willie Ogletree was mentioned, I think, in an article with Detroit Free Press News, and he's been doing this as a scorekeeper for 50 years. They wound up, the end of the first quarter, there was something wrong with the book, and all of a sudden Cass is called for a technical because they don't have the book right. And you've asked Mr. Ogletree, I'm sure that he could tell you the 1977 roster, he could tell you the 1983 roster, where they're left-handed, right-handed, along with their number. And And it was like one of those things, wow, like a technical foul. And I'm thinking, I was like, Mr. Ogletree, are you that nervous? You got sweaty palms over there or something like that? And, but I'm more the happiness that I get to see from longtime Cass alumni, my phone was blowing up like crazy afterwards, and there was a lot of heckling that was going on. So, hey, I mean, it is what it is, but that's what I'm going to remember just because, just to see a lot of joy on those people's faces and stuff like that. So hats off to them as well.
For me, I got to say Caleb Renfro, senior swingman for Ferndale Eagles. Another one of these, storybook endings to his career. Caleb Renfro was a 4-year starter, but missed his entire junior season with an injury. Came back this year, was slow out of the gate. I think there were people questioning what kind of season he was going to end up having. And as the season progressed, he started to, build momentum. And it was a huge reason that they went on this run. In the state championship game, I think he had 20 points, 18 points, looked great, showed everyone that the injury was behind him and that he could take this team and lead this team forward. Him, Cam Reed, and Chris Williams were really the straws that stirred the drink for that group. And it's just, if you would have said to me at the first week of January that, not that Ferndale was going to make a run, but that Caleb Renfro, after that first month where he didn't look like he was 100% healthy, if you would have told me they're going to win the state championship and Caleb's going to be the leading scorer in the state championship game, I don't know if I would have believed it, but I would have told you if that happens, what a tremendous narrative and something that will be remembered at a school and within a program like Cass Tech with a lot of tradition, even though they don't have a lot of state championships or more recently any state championships until this year. So just to have your senior captain be able to go out like that, I just think it was a great way to end his career, to cap off this Ferndale State Championship, and to be with that group of guys, Cam Reed, Chris Williams, and Caleb, that were playing and starting since they were freshmen, that went through the whole 4 years at Ferndale with Juan. I think that was his first full group to go through with them since he came from East English. And to see them end the way they ended is just, it's storybook.
Renfro should have a slice on the house at Como's until he dies, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So they'll all be good with whatever.
Well, they got the Little Caesars right next to their school. Then you got to go down another mile before you hit Como.
They got that one great sandwich place with arguably, it's killing me. But I want to let you know, the owner is one of the top 5 wildest cats that you'll ever talk to, and it's right in the neighborhood. But I think it's open from like 11 to 3. But he talks to everybody.
Oh, Mitch, you mean Ernie's?
Yes.
Yes, Ernie's.
Okay. Yeah,
famous.
So sponsorship next year, we're looking for you.
Check it out, some culinary advice there. All right, well, my story is in Munising. It took 70 years to create this story. In 1954, the Mustangs claimed a regional title behind a player named Chuck Nebel, who accepted the regional trophy. Almost 70 years later, his grandson was ready to lead Munising a little deeper in the tournament this time. In fact, back in '54, the Mackinac Bridge had not been built yet, so they had to ferry to their playoff games in the Lower Peninsula. Well, Chuck was in the stands to see Kane Nebel hoist the hardware, and that's what it's all about.
It's a beautiful thing, and I'll tell you what, one thing that I really love seeing about like the champions, a lot of those, this is their last game that they'll ever play, organized and obviously they're going to have guys that are going to go play on in college, but the guys that really put in the grit, the guys that were playing for the love of the game, just to see like, wow, we did it, and then you have the agony of defeat on the other side. And I've been there multiple times. But it just, my heart goes out to all the participants in this season. Obviously the seniors, and hats off to you guys. You guys have been through, whether they were freshmen when right before COVID comes along, and then their year is interrupted because of COVID. Their sophomore year, and then they didn't get to play in front of a lot of guys their junior year, and now finally their senior year. They were able to, whether you won or lost, at least you were able to have a full season. You were able to have a ton of fans, and I think that this group right here, they've been through a lot, and just to see them come out on the other end, whether they're going on to play whatever their endeavors are in the future, whether it be basketball, being a great person in life, hopefully, that's the important thing in
I want to make a
high school sports.
Make a correction. TJ just sparked my memory.
Intellect.
The Ferndale guys, they only finished 3 seasons. So the only seasons they finished, they got to the Final Four. In my mind, I said they won a regional. The season got canceled.
That's right.
We didn't know what would happen with that group.
District finals got canceled.
So it's even more impressive that those 3 guys, Caleb, Chris, and Cam, every season that finished, they finished at the Breslin.
Well, I'll tell you what, shout out to you guys and for what you do for high school basketball. I know that everyone appreciates all the coverage that you give to the boys and, all season long. And again, we love talking boys basketball here on State Champs. We're going to do it again. Hopefully we've got some really exciting things to announce in the future. Really exciting things, including some events and some things like that. So that's really the most I can tease because nothing's really been worked out. So if you watch the show later and then you say, hey, what happened? You don't hear anything. Well, I couldn't work it out. But let's hope we can get things worked out because it's going to be super exciting. And again, that's it. We're going to put a bow on this season, the 2022-2023 boys basketball season. Again, congratulations to all the state champions. We have a blast doing this, and we'll be happy to come back and talk about it all once again. Real quick, and I didn't even give these guys a clue as to what I was going to ask them, but real quick, just who would you say, and you got to come off the top of your head, who do you think's the favorite for Mr. Basketball next season?
Ooh. You know what? Fat Brooks, he's got the resume, but I guess resumes maybe don't count anymore, but we'll find out. But I really think that Fat Brooks is definitely in there, and I think that, there's some other guys, that obviously will make a charge.
We got some super juniors
and
next
the
season,
junior
that's
class
for sure,
is absolutely
but we're not talking seniors.
Yeah, you know what? I would have probably defaulted to Fat too because he's the guy that's been probably the most high profile of that class, make the most trips deep in the tournament run. I'll throw this name out as a sleeper. I mean, I think Warren Marshall, nobody's talking about him as Mr. Basketball, but I think he could have a really big year at Rice next year.
We shall see.
Yeah, with the opportunity to put up great stats as well.
Yeah.
We shall see, so stay tuned. We'll talk to you next year, but thanks for watching this year's edition of State Champs at the State Final.
State Champs at the State Finals is presented by Lawrence Technological University. To find out more about the athletic programs that are offered at LTU, visit l2athletics.com. State Champs at the State Finals is also brought to you by the Michigan High School Athletic Association, promoting the value and values of educational athletics. The Michigan Army National Guard, a proud sponsor of the MHSAA. The Basketball Coaches Association of Michigan. Find out more at bcam.org. The Detroit Athletic Club Foundation's Male and Female Athlete of the Year Awards. Who will be this year's award winners? Find out live June 5th only on the State Champs Sports Network.